Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Air Exchange, a Hollingsworth and Vose indoor air quality educational series. I'm your host, Bruce Larange, and I'm pleased today to have with us our esteemed guest, Alain Berard, who is the Global Sales and Marketing President for Camfil, as well as the world's very first Chief Ergonomics Officer, or CAO, which we'll learn more about during this episode. Alain, thank you so much for taking time during your very busy schedule to be here with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting, Bruce. That's a real pleasure to me.
Well, maybe for the sake of our viewers, you can share a little bit about your background at Camfil and a little about your experience and how that's shaped your passion for filtration and indoor air quality.
All right. Exactly as you said, Bruce, I am the president for sales and marketing at global level. And I've been with Camfil 26 years now in various top management functions. What I really like at Camfil is that passion we have for clean air and all kinds of solutions depending on segments and applications for us to be able to clean the air and therefore protect people, protect industrial processes, and protect our planet.
Excellent. Well, the idea of a chief ergonomics officer is fantastic. It seems long overdue. It would be great to hear a little bit about how the idea came about, how Camfil decided to introduce this role, and maybe a little about what it means to you personally as well.
All right. Let me say a few words about Camfil, and then I'll explain how we came about this with this CAO, Chief Ergonomics Officer initiative. Camfil is one of the global leaders when it goes to clean air solutions. We primarily make filtration solutions for both commercial and industrial applications. We are about 6,000 employees spread around our planet in 35 countries. We have been very innovative, I think, in terms of filtration technologies and products, always aiming at supplying good efficiency, good performance filters with the lowest possible TCO, total cost of ownership, talking primarily about energy savings. We have been very active in terms of promoting standards, international standards in the industry.
Right.
And I must say we've been one of the leading forces when it goes to implementing sustainability within the industry. That has been a 15 years journey for us already. So how did we come to that CAO approach? We had a kind of long brainstorm process very end of last year. And we said, look, we've deployed tons of ideas, primarily very technical oriented with standards and numbers. And we said, look, now we need maybe more human approach. We would need someone to be able to advocate about clean air, to be able to talk about possible solutions. And basically we said, look, we need an ambassador. So how do you portray an ambassador? It's a C-suite guy. So chief ergonomics, meaning we play with the words here, air and ergonomics. So we said, look, it's going to be best practices around indoor air quality. So Chief Ergonomics Officer. So it's just an extension of our journey when it goes to advocate about clean air.
Excellent. Well, I can't think of a better ambassador, Alain. And I know that you've started to roll out the idea, leading by example at Camfil. While this is something that the hope is that there will be wide-scale adoption across, multiple companies, building owners getting behind this and so on. But from the experience that you have as the first CAO within your own company, can you share how this has been received even by your own team, or any information about how it's been to roll this out in your company, and what sort of feedback you're getting internally?
All right. Yeah, it's a very good point. We are cautious at Camfil, and we like to
Right.
proceed step by step, I would say. So we said, look,
Sure.
we want to understand what we are going to talk about so that you can basically practice what we preach, right? So what are we going to talk about? We said, look, to be very cautious here, let's do the first phase of that CAO journey purely internally. So we want to protect our employees in terms of bringing to them a good indoor air quality in all our facilities, offices, branches, factories around the globe. All right. So we launched that internal initiative back in March this year. Our CEO, Mark Simmons, nominated me or appointed me as CAO, and we started cascading a kind of an organization, a CAO network. We now have more than 100 AOs, ergonomics offices, in
Wow.
basically or in all our facilities. We've equipped all those AOs with sensors, IAQ sensors, so that they could measure and track indoor air quality in our facilities. And for the past 3-4 months now, we've had real-time IAQ measurements in more than 100 locations, basically our Camfil planet. So
Excellent.
through that exercise, we've been able to understand how to measure, how to make any conclusion, how to improve air quality in our offices, in our factories, warehouses, and so. So that has been a great learning curve for us, I must say.
Fantastic. I mean, I think it's wonderful that, again, you're leading by example. And as a filtration solutions company, of course, your culture, I think, internally understands the importance of indoor air quality, maybe more than a lot of other companies, or you're thinking more about it. I'm curious, since the goal is, of course, to see this CAO role and a focus on indoor air quality more prominent across all sorts of companies, buildings, facilities. Um, how do you see this being received? I know, for example, for the last few months, I've seen on LinkedIn that Camfil and also the chiefergonomicsofficer.com website has been promoting and advocating this concept. Have you gotten feedback or interest, or what are you seeing out there as far as the interest level of companies that aren't as familiar with or part of the filtration industry?
Right, good one. But let me come back to our internal phase first, because even at our level, knowing quite a bit in terms of indoor air quality, we've had difficulties building up our structure. Who should be a chief ergonomics officer? What should he or she do?
Right.
And it's easy to define, it's easy to plan and elaborate. And suddenly comes the investment part. Oh, you've got to invest so that you can improve air quality. All right, we are exactly in that process right now, budget time, thinking about 2023. And money talks. So next year, each managing director of our daughter companies have to come up with an investment plan. In this warehouse, I'm going to invest in an air cleaner so that I will clean the air and provide good air to my employees. Good. So we've been going through that process, and there are challenges, money challenges, understanding challenges, and so that's one. Overall, that has been very well perceived, but we shouldn't hide difficulties and challenges. Okay. Now, late December, we decided to start our external communication campaign, and we launched a micro website and a LinkedIn group called the Chief Ergonomics Officer Network. We now have more than 600 members on that LinkedIn group. And the perception, to me, the perception has been extremely positive to start with. We have a few KPIs or metrics to understand how well this is perceived, but the time spent by visitors to both the website or the LinkedIn group is just gives you an idea of how interested those visitors are. Then we've had a couple of guys, I should say a couple of hundred guys calling us and saying, hey, how should I proceed? I am interested, but is there an educational program, or can I talk about that? How should I proceed moving forward? So we've been helping the guys step by step, and because of all those common questions coming from here and there, would that be India, China, US, Europe, and so, we said, okay, there are a couple of things we are going to work out. One is a training program that we will launch first week of January. There will be 7 sessions, small videos, and some webinars. So people will be able to subscribe, go there, spend an hour, understand the highlights at least, and then go through the training program. That's one. 2, we have tried to make very simple the way to proceed in terms of measuring your air quality, improving your air quality, who should be in charge, who to talk to, and so all that organization and the process. So we are now at a point when I think we have a much clearer idea on how to proceed. But one thing is really important is that at Camfil, we only make filters. To provide good air quality to your employees, you also need a good air handling unit and a good fan, and so we are only a kind of a part of the overall solution. So we are definitely looking for partners, and that was one of the reasons for getting in touch with you at H&V, because again, we're only Camfil, but we would be delighted facilitating some kind of a partnership, an alliance, all talking clean air.
Yeah, fantastic. I think an ecosystem around clean air is certainly needed, and Camfil is taking a leading role there. I think with this CAO position, and I wanted to kind of expand a little bit more on this idea of costs. When you mentioned we have to be open to the realities and the challenges of this, it is a new concept again for you and I who are in the filtration industry, and others like us. We spend a lot of time thinking about these things, but this is still a pretty new space, an area to think about, largely since COVID for most people who are not filtration industry specific. So one question I have: we know we've seen a lot of the data, and we're hearing constantly that humans are an indoor species, and we spend over 90% of our time indoors, and that of course air quality can be 2 to 5 times or even higher, worse than the quality of air outdoors, and so on. So the health upside seems to make sense, and people understand that. But of course, money talks, as you said, and for business owners or those who are paying for clean air in an organization, are there any financial benefits? I've seen different reports and research around productivity improvements and less absence absentee days and even the potential for building owners to offer higher rents for cleaner air because of some of these financial benefits. Are there any financial upsides or bottom line impacts to clean air that you can comment on or talk to that would maybe make it easier for a company or someone who's implementing this within their company and building to think about financial advantages, not just health advantages of clean air?
Right. Uh, Very good point. Um, I see clean air as a very sound investment. In other words, health is one part of the story, but who pays for health costs? You do, I do, but would our employers do? To some extent, yes, no, that's debatable, depending on countries and so. What is clear to everyone is that absenteeism kills, that increases costs to an extent that, I mean, everybody can calculate what the cost of that absenteeism, replacing people and ensuring they are educated enough for that position. So, all right, that's one. Two is productivity. I am in good mood, in good health condition. Do I produce more or less than a guy who is constantly sick? There are studies, so lacking time here to go through those studies, but actually that's one of those big training sessions that we have come up with as far as January launch. So we will go through that. We do not have our own studies at Camfil, but we rely on external parties, third parties, which are not questionable. Would that be the WHO here, some universities, famous universities, primarily in the US and England? And based on those facts, everybody can assess what the financial cost is for not protecting people and what is the financial advantage of ensuring that everybody breathes good air. But Bruce, you mentioned COVID, and I think it's absolutely key to understand that our people, our employees, have gained a lot in, I would say, awareness about what's in the air. COVID is an airborne virus. How can you protect yourself against COVID? Either a mask or a good HVAC system that filtrates and stops viruses. Okay, that awareness is there. So more and more people are now paying attention to, if I come back to my office, am I protected here?
Right.
Or I apply to a new job, a new company, do you pay attention to your people, mister? So those questions cannot be avoided. I think it's part of our today's working environment. And I think to that extent, investing in clean air is a very sound investment. Very sound.
Well said. And yeah, certainly important to be advocating for this because sometimes cleaner air does take some investment and can cost more, but there's a lot of upside beyond the obvious of just health and having a better environment indoors. Um, Something that I'm curious about, knowing that likely at Camfil you own some of your facilities and your facilities managers are internally part of your team. For companies that don't own the building that they operate in, how do you see the CAO, working with facilities managers or building owners? Do you see any challenges there, or what is your thinking around how there can be some harmony in thinking between the occupants who are benefiting from clean air and the building owners or facilities managers who are often managing the filtration and in charge of really what happens in the facility?
Okay, okay, different scenarios here, but if I take them one by one. As Camfil, I am a landlord. I own my factory, my offices, and I want to protect my people. So I'm going to invest, ensure that the investment gives a good payback. and I will provide good clean air. I do not own my facility, but I rent it, I lease it. All right, so I'm going to find out whether the landlord wants to invest, or I'm going to do it by myself. There are portable mobile solutions which are totally okay. We call that air cleaners, cam cleaners in the case of Camfil. That's common product, easy to buy, install and use, and everybody can go through that route. Now, it's good you mentioned the FM companies handling those facilities on behalf of landlords. A lot of the biggest facility management companies are now coming to us. I have in mind 5 different names because those big guys now understand that clean air is a part of the value of that building. In other words, would you be able to find tenants saying, we guarantee that, blah, 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 blah? You obviously increase the valuation of your building, your facility. So I'm not saying that all guys are aware of that, but the ones who have gotten point are clearly moving that direction, making it a kind of differentiation versus their FM competitors.
Great points, Alain, and I think it's great that you highlight, even if there isn't an ability to control the HVAC unit, that there are other environmental actions you could take for cleaner air, like room air purifiers and such. But hopefully, part of the goal of what you're advocating for, and hopefully an ecosystem emerging that can advocate for cleaner air in buildings, is that building owners and facilities management companies will start to see the value, and that tenants, occupants, and their health and the importance will start to overcome some of maybe the preconceived ideas around what expenses there could be and so on. So really great insights. One other question I had, Alain, is related to just the ecosystem. To go back to this idea about partners, we know that this is going to take some time for the general public to really be thinking about clean air in the way that filtration professionals are, and maybe medical professionals. What can you comment a bit more on, how you see an ecosystem forming, or what sort of information would be helpful, how we can communicate better to the general public to help the chief ergonomics officer initiative to spread and become more widely accepted?
Good. That's a big challenge, I'm telling you. At Camfil, we are purely in the B2B business. We do not talk to consumers. We don't know how to operate in that field. So I'm going to stick to the pure B2B side of it. What we see is that a bunch of companies have as business concept basically clean air. Air handling unit manufacturers, fan manufacturers, all those guys are primarily working towards air movement and preferably clean air movement. All right. The way I see it is that there are already some trade association of all kinds. Would that be in Europe or in the US or even in Asia Pacific? And those guys are getting interested. That's one. Now, we are also trying a couple of attempts with influencers, which are not directly acting in our field. Those guys are not suppliers or customers of Camfil, but they have some influence over various stakeholders in that industry. And I'm thinking, because it's really our DNA, I'm thinking about scientists. I'm thinking about guys who have studied the health impact of clean air, because I think that one of the main challenges when it goes to talking about clean air is the fact that air is invisible. You don't see the dust. You rarely see dust. I mean, when you talk about clean water, you can easily see that that water is muddy, right? It's not clean. But when it goes to air, it's difficult to see. And basically, that invisible world is very difficult to depict. But there are so many people who have already studied factually by the micron, submicron, and so the health impact of particles, of gases, and so that I would very much like to see within those partnerships, not only industrial stakeholders, but also scientists and guys who can truly talk about health impacts. Now, there are also people, and we are working with some universities studying mental health in relation to air pollution, for instance, productivity, creativity as a result of clean or dirty air. And that might be really interesting, not talking about health, but talking about productivity at work. So I think we have to join forces here. And if Camfil may help here, that will be with a lot of pleasure.
Fantastic. I mean, really great insights, Alain. And I think the other thing that sticks out to me is the importance of simplifying or demystifying the data. As you mentioned, because this is an invisible issue largely, in some ways I picture it as we're sort of all goldfish swimming in tanks that are not as clean as we think. But until the advent of sensor technology, which is getting more affordable, more prevalent, it's been hard to know the data. But then once we have the data, making it simpler, easier for people to understand that are not from a science background. And so we clearly have a lot of work to do with the industry, hopefully leading those efforts. But I want to thank you and really enjoyed our conversation today, Alain. And I wanted to thank you again for taking time during such a busy time of the year. You're always busy, but it means a lot that you joined for this conversation. And it was a lot of fun to connect and to talk clean air with you today.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Real pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alain. And for our viewers, thank you for tuning in. If you found today educational or interesting in content, please do share that with others. And we're looking forward to having you join future conversations around clean air. Until then, I am your host, Bruce Larange, wishing everyone healthy and happy breathing. Thank you.